Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
I don't talk much about my life. It's simple, you know. People usually assume I'm hiding something, but there's nothing to hide. I'm just content, quiet, secure. I work as an equipment scheduler for a manufacturing supply company in a small town in Oregon. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills, and that's all I need. My job's straightforward, and that's exactly how I like it. I drive an old Chevy Malibu that's seen better days, but it runs. The car's as reliable as everything else in my life. I don't need flash. I don't need to impress anyone. Most days, I'm content to watch my savings grow, the numbers ticking up like a countdown to something better. Each deposit feels like a little victory, a little more control over a world that's never promised much. The money doesn't mean luxury, it means preparation. It means that if something goes wrong, I'll be ready. I'm not waiting for the sky to fall. I've built this, slowly, intentionally. Every dollar I save is like a small solid wall that keeps chaos out. My family doesn't get it. They don't get me. Jill, my older sister, and Rob, her husband, live in Spokane, and we only see them during family gatherings. They always show up late, like they have somewhere better to be, then sweep in with their shiny new cars and their loud, oversized personalities. They're fine, I guess, but they don't get why I choose this life. They don't understand that stability doesn't come from possessions. It comes from knowing you have the ability to weather any storm. I don't mind being separate from them. My values are different. Their idea of success is all about appearances, vacations, new houses, the latest gadgets. I don't care about any of that. I found peace and simplicity. So, yeah, I'm fine. Quiet, secure, and that's enough for me. The drive out to the National Forest campground felt like a long one. Not that I minded. The two-lane highway stretched out ahead of me, the familiar patchwork of green and brown hills rolling by. There was something peaceful about it, the quiet hum of my car and the endless stretch of Oregon countryside. I liked how things stayed still on these trips, how nothing was really expected. The campground was just like every year, rows of lawn chairs, picnic tables, and coolers packed with hot dogs and soda. The smell of campfire smoke and pine trees always seemed to mix into something I could almost taste. My parents had already set up their little tent, and uncles and cousins were gathered around, playing horseshoes and arguing over the grill. It was typical family stuff, the kind of thing you couldn't escape, no matter how much you wanted to. Jill and Rob showed up late, of course. They made a scene, as usual. The shiny rental SUV pulled in with the kind of engine roar that made everyone turn their heads. Jill hopped out first, all bright-eyed and stylish, as if she was still on some kind of vacation instead of at a family gathering. Rob followed her out, all swagger and loud laughter, slinging their bags over his shoulder. "Well, well, look who it is," Jill said, her voice too bright, Miss Responsible herself. She gave me one of those smirks, the kind she always gives when she's not sure whether to mock or compliment you. I felt the familiar burn of her words, like she was poking fun at how simple my life was. "Someone has to keep things together," I said, trying to keep it light. Rob slapped me on the back like we were old friends. "Hey, Donna," he said, grinning. "You must be loaded by now, huh? You've probably got a bunker full of cash somewhere, right?" I didn't laugh. Didn't even want to. People like them, they never understood. "Not exactly," I said, shrugging. "Just saving for a rainy day." Jill scoffed and rolled her eyes like my idea of financial security was some kind of joke. Sure. Responsible as always. She didn't let it go. The day stretched out like it always did. Endless games of cards, some people napping, others arguing over who made the best potato salad. But as the sun sank behind the trees, casting everything in a soft orange glow, the air seemed to settle. Everyone gathered around the fire pit as the night pulled in, the crackling flames mixing with the quiet chatter and the smell of roasting marshmallows. Jill and I sat near the edge of the circle, a little away from everyone else. It wasn't by design, I just couldn't do the small talk. She didn't seem to mind. At first, she was quiet, staring into the fire, and for a moment, I almost felt like she was actually thinking about something that wasn't mocking me or judging my life. Then she turned her head toward me, her gaze serious but not quite sad. "You've really made it, huh?" she said softly. The question caught me off guard, and I looked at her for a second, trying to read her face. Was she mocking me again? Or was this something different? I didn't know. Either way, I wasn't about to let it bother me. "Yeah," I said, brushing it off. "I guess you could say that." Jill didn't respond, just kept staring at me. like she was waiting for something more. Maybe an apology, maybe a confession. But I didn't have either. I didn't owe her anything. The fire crackled between us, and I turned my gaze back to it, letting the warmth of the flames swallow up the awkwardness. Sometimes it was easier to let silence be the answer. The next afternoon, most of the family had fallen into their usual rhythms, napping, playing cards, laughing about nothing. I didn't mind the quiet. I liked the space, the way things moved around me without needing me to be part of every moment. But then Jill showed up, looking a little too bright-eyed, a little too eager. "Hey," she said, standing next to me where I was sitting under a tree, watching my cousins chase each other across the field. "Want to go for a short hike?" Just get away from everything for a bit. I didn't really want to, but it wasn't like I had any excuse to turn her down. Besides, it felt like one of those rare moments when she actually wanted to talk to me, not just mock me or keep her distance. So I stood up, brushed the pine needles off my jeans, and followed her down the path that led into the trees. The trail wasn't far, just a winding, shaded stretch through the forest. The smell of damp earth and pine needles mixed with the sweet scent of wildflowers. The air was cooler here, the light dappling through the leaves above. We walked in silence for a few minutes, both of us trying to get our bearings in this strange quiet that had settled between us. It wasn't awkward, but it wasn't comfortable either. Then, out of nowhere, Jill stopped walking and turned to face me. Her eyes were wide, something in them soft, almost vulnerable. It caught me off guard. "I don't know who else to talk to," she said, her voice cracking. She blinked hard, like she was trying to push back tears, but they came anyway. She took a shaky breath and wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "I don't know what to do anymore, Donna." I just stood there, not sure how to respond. I didn't know what kind of moment this was supposed to be, but I felt it coming on. Something big, something I hadn't expected. "What's going on?" I asked quietly, though I didn't really want to know. Jill's face crumpled, like everything she'd been holding back finally broke free. "We're in trouble, Donna. Bad trouble. Rob and I, we're drowning in credit card debt, medical bills, layoffs. It's all piling up, and I don't know how we're going to get out of it. It's too much." She took a shaky breath, and I could see the effort it took for her to keep herself together. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm pregnant, Donna. I just found out a few days ago. It wasn't planned." She swallowed hard, like the words were too heavy to say. "I don't know what to do." I froze. The words hit me like a punch in the stomach. Jill? Pregnant? Everything she'd just said crashed together in my head, and for a second, I didn't know how to feel. Sorry? Angry? Just stunned. I don't know what to say," I muttered, my hands awkward at my sides. I wasn't good at this, good at dealing with emotions like these, especially when they felt so urgent, so raw. But there she was, her eyes pleading, her voice so small. After a few seconds of silence, I said, "You know, I could help. I could give you some money if you need it." The words felt strange on my tongue, but I meant them. I didn't know if it would help or if it would make things worse, but it was all I could offer. Jill shook her head quickly, almost too quickly. "No, Donna, I can't ask you for that. You've worked so hard for everything you've got." She paused and then looked up at me, as if seeing me for the first time. "I didn't expect you to offer that, but thank you. I really didn't think you'd say that." I didn't know if she was thanking me for offering or just for not judging her, but I felt the heaviness settle between us, like we were both trying to figure out what this was, what we were. But the gears in my head were already turning. I was already calculating how much I could give without hurting myself. How much was too much? How much would she need? 6,000? Maybe 10? I didn't want to offer more than I could handle. I didn't want to jeopardize my own peace, my own security. I opened my mouth to say something else, but Jill cut me off. "I don't even know if I should take it," she murmured. "But I'll think about it, Donna. I'll think about it." She wiped her eyes again, not wanting to break down in front of me. I could see it, though, how close she was to falling apart. And it scared me, how close I was to letting her. She gave me a tight smile like she was trying to hold it all in. "Let's just keep walking, okay?" I nodded, trying to keep the weight of it all from crushing me, from taking the air out of my lungs. We turned back toward the trail, and the whole time, my mind raced, calculating, questioning, wondering what this would cost me. I woke up earlier than usual the next morning. The sun was barely peeking over the trees, casting long shadows across the cabin floor. I slipped out of bed quietly, careful not to wake anyone, and made my way to the kitchen. The coffee pot was already half full, and the smell of it hung in the air, strong and comforting. I was half dreaming when I stepped inside, trying to shake off the fog of sleep, and then I saw it. Jill was sitting at the small kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She quickly slammed the lid shut when I walked in, like I'd caught her in the middle of something. Her eyes darted to me, wide and too bright, and she gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, hey," she said, voice a little too casual. "I was just checking the weather. My phone died, so I figured I'd look it up here." I nodded, shrugging it off. "Yeah, no big deal." But something about the way she closed the laptop, quick, too quick, pulled at something inside me. Maybe it was nothing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something. I grabbed a mug from the cabinet and poured myself some coffee, trying not to stare at her. She was acting weird, and I hated that feeling, like something was off, but you couldn't quite put your finger on it. I kept telling myself it was probably nothing. After a few seconds, I turned toward the counter, pretending to fiddle with the sugar, when I noticed my phone charging in the corner. I'd forgotten to check my bank account before I left for the trip, so I pulled it out and opened the app. Everything was fine. For now. I told myself it was just a weird moment, that Jill was probably just feeling off about the pregnancy news, but something in the pit of my stomach twisted as I glanced at her again. She was staring out the window, her fingers tapping restlessly against the table. The rest of the morning passed in a blur, the usual chatter and bustle of breakfast fading into the background as I couldn't stop thinking about the laptop. What had she been doing? Why the weird reaction? I didn't want to be paranoid, but the feeling wouldn't leave. Later, when I was alone in my room, I opened up my bank app again, just to check. I didn't know why, but something told me to. Maybe it was the nagging thought that Jill had been poking around. The idea of money, her asking for it, taking it, whatever she'd done, sat heavy in my chest. I hit change password, took a few extra minutes to set up two-factor authentication, and then sat back. I felt a little better, but not much. It wasn't like I thought Jill had done anything yet. It was just a gut feeling. That night, when the fire had burned down to embers and everyone else was settling in for bed, I lay awake. The cabin was quiet, save for the rustling of tree branches outside. My mind wouldn't shut off. I kept running the numbers through my head. How much to offer her, what would be fair, what I could afford without feeling like I was sacrificing my own future. I thought about $6,000. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it would be enough to cover what they needed without it draining me. Or maybe I could give her $10,000, more than I'd ever imagined handing out in one go. But it might make a real difference for her and Rob. No questions asked, no guilt. A gift. The idea of giving money without strings attached felt like a big leap. I didn't want to be resentful. I didn't want to be the person who held it over her head, but I also didn't want to be stupid about it. I stared at the ceiling, the cabin still and silent around me. Jill's face, her tear-filled eyes on the trail earlier that afternoon, played in my mind. She was desperate, but I didn't know if that desperation was enough to trust. I closed my eyes, trying to ignore the gnawing uncertainty in my stomach. I'd figure it out. I always did. Monday morning felt like any other. I dragged myself out of bed, groggy and half awake, and shuffled to the kitchen. The coffee machine hummed to life, and I leaned against the counter, waiting for the bitter black liquid to pour into my mug. The quiet of the house wrapped around me, almost peaceful. Almost. I didn't even think about it at first, just followed the motions, stretching and sipping my coffee. When I finally sat down at the table, though, I pulled out my phone, the one thing that grounded me in the rhythm of my day. My bank account had been on my mind since last night. Jill's weird behavior, the way I kept second-guessing myself. But I wasn't prepared for what I saw when I logged in. The account balance was empty, zero, no numbers, just a blank space. I froze. I thought I had misread it, but no. I refreshed the page, still zero. I logged out, logged back in, thinking it was some weird glitch in the system. Nothing. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight, as I stared at the empty account, trying to make sense of it. I grabbed my phone, dialing the bank with shaky hands. "Hello, this is Megan from Bank of Oregon. How can I help you today?" The voice on the other end was cheery, too cheerful for the pounding in my head. "Hi, there's a problem with my account. I'm seeing zero balance. I need to know what happened," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though it cracked at the edges. "Let me pull up your account information. Can you verify your name and address?" I went through the motions, trying to focus on what I was saying, but my mind was already racing. I could feel my pulse in my neck, the heat creeping up my face. "Thank you for your patience," Megan said after a long pause. "It looks like there were multiple outgoing transfers over the weekend. Over $200,000 in total, spread across several accounts." My stomach dropped. My world tipped sideways. "What? How? I didn't make any transfers." "I'm sorry, ma'am. The transfers appear to have been authorized and processed. They've all gone to other accounts." I felt numb. The room spun for a second, and I couldn't breathe. Couldn't make my thoughts work fast enough to keep up. It wasn't real. This couldn't be happening. "Can you send me a transaction list?" "Now," I managed to say, the words coming out like gravel. "Certainly. I'll email that to you right away." The call ended, and I sat there in silence. I didn't know what to do. Didn't know if I should feel furious or just completely devastated. I kept staring at the screen, hoping it would change. That somehow I'd made a mistake. That this wasn't real. The email arrived just a few minutes later. I opened it and scrolled through the list of transactions, the amounts blinking back at me like an accusation. Each one was linked to a name, Jill and Rob. They were the ones who'd taken the money. Each transfer, each withdrawal clearly traceable. It was all right there in front of me, undeniable. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, a sharp, brutal sting that cut deeper with every name I read. My blood ran cold, my hands shaking. There was no mistake, no misunderstanding. Jill and Rob had stolen from me. My heart pounded in my chest as the weight of it hit me. I'd been played, all of it. The pregnancy, the desperation. It had all been a lie. I grabbed my keys and slammed the door behind me, not caring that I hadn't packed properly, that my head was still reeling. I didn't need anything but to fix this, to confront them. I wasn't sure what I was going to say or do, but I had to go. The drive to Spokane felt like it lasted forever. Every mile was a battle against the whirlwind in my mind. I thought about what I was going to say to Jill and Rob, about what I'd learned, about how I'd been fooled. I thought about how they'd lied straight to my face. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. The road stretched ahead, but I wasn't sure I was even on it anymore. All I could think about was the betrayal, the way they'd taken everything I had worked for, and worse, the way they'd made me feel responsible for them. By the time I reached Spokane, the weight of it all had settled deep in my chest. My hands were clammy, my mind still racing. But one thing was certain. I was done. Whatever this was, whatever they thought they could get away with, it ended now. I pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex, my stomach twisted into a knot. The place was a dump, paint peeling off the walls, windows cracked, and the smell of stale cigarettes clinging to everything. The kind of place you don't want to look too closely at because it reminds you that not everyone's life works out like it's supposed to. I parked, took a long breath, and got out. My legs felt shaky, but I didn't stop walking. I didn't have time to be scared. This needed to happen, right now. I rang the doorbell and waited. The seconds dragged by, each one louder than the last, until the door finally creaked open. Rob's face appeared, his grin wide, a little too wide, like he was trying too hard to seem casual. "Well, look who it is," he said, his voice thick with that false cheer. "Donna, what brings you by?" I didn't say anything at first. I just stared at him, my breath steady, but my heart thumping loud in my ears. Finally, I walked past him, pushing the door open just enough to slip through, like I'd done it 100 times before. Jill was sitting on the couch, flipping through some magazine. She looked up when I stepped in, and her eyes shifted for a split second, just long enough for me to see the guilt flashing in them before she wiped it away. "Donna?" she asked, her voice too sweet. "What are you doing here?" I stood there for a second, just looking at her. Her calmness, her nonchalant posture, like everything was normal. Like she hadn't stolen from me. "I know," I said, my voice flat, almost too calm for the fury bubbling just beneath the surface. "I know what you did." Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't speak right away. Rob chuckled, his voice grating on my nerves. "Oh, come on," he said, stepping into the room. "What, you think we just took your money?" "You're exaggerating." Donna Jill gave him a sharp look, like he should keep quiet, but it was too late. I saw the way her eyes flicked toward him, how she didn't try to stop him. I turned to Jill. "You took over $200,000 from me. I have the proof, all of it. You think you can just get away with it?" Her gaze dropped to the floor, her fingers absently tugging at the hem of her sleeve. At first, she didn't say anything. Then, after what felt like forever, she spoke. We needed it more than you, she said, her voice low, like it was some kind of justification. I stared at her, the words hanging in the air, suffocating me. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even ashamed. She just thought she deserved it. Rob snorted, crossing his arms. Yeah, it's not like you were using it, right? You've got plenty. It's not like you'd miss it. My pulse was racing now, my hands shaking, but I kept my voice steady. I'm calling the police. Jill froze. Her face, which had been indifferent up until that point, went pale, the color draining from her cheeks. She looked at Rob, but he didn't meet her eyes. You're crazy, Rob said, his voice rising. Don't do that. You don't have to make it this big of a deal. He stepped toward me, his hands outstretched like he was trying to calm me down. But I wasn't having it. I'm not going to let you get away with this, I said. You took everything from me, everything I've worked for, all those years, and you just took it. I'm calling the police. I pulled my phone from my pocket, dialed 911, and as I waited for the line to pick up, I locked eyes with Jill. Her face was twisted now, the anger seeping through the cracks of the calm facade she'd kept up until now. Donna, don't do this, she said, her voice breaking. But there was no sympathy in it, no apology. She didn't regret it, not really. She was just scared now that the consequences were real. I didn't flinch. I didn't feel anything in that moment, other than the steady pulse of certainty that I was doing the right thing. Police, what's your emergency? The operator asked. I need the police sent to 2073 Pinewood Drive, apartment 12. My sister and her husband have stolen a large sum of money from me, I said, my voice controlled but firm. I have all the proof. The operator confirmed the details, and I hung up the phone. Rob was still standing in the doorway, his face a mask of anger and desperation, like he was trying to figure out how to twist this around on me. But it was too late. The police would be here soon. I'll be waiting, I said, turning on my heel. I didn't wait for them to say anything else. I just walked out the door, not caring if they followed, not caring if they tried to stop me. I knew what I had to do, and that was the end of it. The police came a few days later. They arrested both of them, Jill and Rob. The charges were serious, too serious to sweep under the rug. The family tried to sweep it under the rug, tried to say it was a misunderstanding, but no one could deny the evidence. I didn't feel relief, not right away, but I knew it was over, and that was something I could live with. The phone rang late the next night, just after I'd gotten into bed, the room still heavy with silence. I could feel the tension of the past few days in my shoulders, the knot that hadn't loosened. I didn't recognize the number, but I had a feeling. Hello? Donna? My mom's voice cracked as she said my name, and I felt a shift in my gut. It wasn't the usual calm tone. This was raw, trembling. What have you done? How could you do this to your own sister? Her words hit me like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I held the phone tighter, feeling the weight of her disbelief pressing down on me. She was crying, and that was harder than anything she could have said. Mom, I had no choice, I said, trying to keep my voice even though every part of me wanted to shout, to tell her she had no idea what they'd done. She took everything from me. I couldn't just let it slide. She's pregnant, Donna, she cried, her voice desperate, frantic. She needs help, not jail. She's carrying a baby, for God's sake. She's not like you with your perfect life. You can't just... I didn't let her finish. My jaw tightened, and I cut her off, the words coming out sharper than I meant. She's not pregnant, Mom. She admitted it during questioning. There was a long pause, the kind that made my heart race. I could hear my mother's breath on the other end, hitching, like she was trying to process what I'd said. I had no idea how long she stayed quiet, but when she finally spoke again, her voice had dropped to a whisper. What? She said, barely audible. What are you talking about? She said. She lied to all of us, I told her. She made it up to get sympathy, to cover up what they did. She's not pregnant. It was all a lie. I felt the air get thicker, every word I said settling between us like a stone. And then my mom just went silent, the kind of silence that feels like the whole world has shifted and no one knows how to find solid ground again. I don't know what to say to you anymore, she said finally, and her voice wasn't just sad, it was accusing, like I'd crossed a line that couldn't be undone. I bit my lip, swallowing the anger that tried to rise. You don't have to say anything. But I couldn't just sit back and let them take everything I've worked for. There was another long pause, and when she spoke again, it was quieter, more defeated. I never thought you'd do something like this. You're my daughter. How could you? The sting of her words hit harder than anything else, harder than the betrayal, the police, even the moments when I'd felt the weight of losing everything. This was the real cost. This shift, the way I could feel her pulling away from me. I'm sorry, Mom, but I'm not sorry for what I did. The line went quiet again, and then I heard her breath catch in her throat. Then the click. She hung up. I stared at the phone for a long time, my heart thudding in my chest. I didn't want to feel guilty. I didn't want to doubt myself. But hearing my mom's voice like that, hearing the way she saw me now, it was a gut punch. I didn't sleep much that night. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to push the thoughts of my family out of my mind. But every time I closed my eyes, I could feel the shift in the air, feel the weight of being the enemy now. I wasn't the daughter they were proud of anymore. Now I was the one who tore the family apart. I could already hear the whispers in the background. The way my mom would tell the rest of the family, twisting the story to make me the villain, the one who overreacted, who took everything too far. That's what I was now. The black sheep, the one who destroyed the family's perfect picture. And maybe they were right. Maybe, in their eyes, I was the one who broke everything. But in my heart, I knew the truth. And that had to be enough. The trial moved fast, faster than I expected. It felt like 1 minute I was sitting there, still in shock, and the next, they were presenting the evidence. The digital forensic team made it clear. All the transfers, the withdrawals, everything pointed directly to Rob and Jill. They couldn't deny it. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some misunderstanding. They'd taken over $200,000 from me. I watched Rob through the whole thing. He sat there, arms crossed, a smug little half smile on his face, like he thought he was above it all. He barely reacted as the evidence stacked against him, his gaze fixed somewhere off to the side. The only thing that seemed to bother him was how people were looking at him. But he didn't flinch. He didn't seem to care. Jill, on the other hand, was a wreck. She cried through most of the trial, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that sounded almost practiced. She wouldn't look at me, not once. I don't know if it was because she was ashamed or if it was because she couldn't stand to face the person she'd hurt the most. Her defense tried to spin it. They tried to tell the court that it was a family misunderstanding, that Jill was desperate, that she needed the money to survive, to pay bills, that I was sitting on a pile of wealth and didn't need it anyway. But the words didn't stick. They just floated in the air, too thin to hold up. No one bought it. Not after the forensics laid it all out. It wasn't a misunderstanding, it was theft. When it was my turn to testify, I didn't flinch. I spoke slowly, calmly, like I was telling a story I didn't care to repeat. I explained everything, how I'd worked my whole life to save that money, how I'd tried to help Jill, tried to offer what I could, how it wasn't about the money, not really. It was about trust. It was about betrayal. I looked straight ahead the entire time, refusing to let my emotions show. But when I saw Jill's face, I almost felt sorry for her. She was sobbing quietly in the corner, her hands clutching the sides of her chair like they were the only thing keeping her from falling apart. But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. The judge spoke in the end. He didn't sugarcoat it. "This is a clear and blatant breach of trust," he said, his voice firm. "Your actions have harmed a family, and the consequences will not be taken lightly." I watched as Rob and Jill shifted in their seats, as if the weight of the words finally hit them. Rob's plea deal came next, 7 years. It was a long sentence, but it was better than what he could have gotten if they'd tried to fight it all the way through. He didn't seem to care about the time. He was already checked out, already thinking about what he'd do when he got out. Jill's sentence was lighter, 2.5 years with probation. She seemed relieved at first, but I could see the tremor in her hands. She knew it wasn't over for her. None of us would ever forget what she did. When the judge slammed down the gavel, I felt nothing. Not relief, not anger, not victory. Just an empty kind of exhaustion, like I had gone through a storm and come out the other side, but the wind was still howling in my ears. The trial was over, but the damage to my family was done. The worst part? Not a single person from my family showed up in court. Not one. I had expected them to be there. Maybe not all of them, but my parents, at least them. They didn't even pick up the phone. I don't know what they were waiting for or if they'd already made up their minds. But it was clear now. I was the one they'd written off, the one who'd broken the family. And maybe I had. Maybe I was the reason we'd all fractured. But at least I knew the truth. At least I didn't have to live with the lie anymore. The verdict didn't bring me peace. It just made the air heavier. And as I walked out of that courtroom, I felt it. The weight of all those eyes, the whispers that would follow me, the silent accusation that I had torn apart something I couldn't fix. But I didn't flinch. I couldn't. It's been a few months since the trial. A few months since I'd gotten that final judgment that wrapped up the mess I'd been dragged through. The restitution came through slowly, in pieces, as if it was meant to somehow lessen the sting. The car, Jill's old Jeep, the one she'd bought with part of the money, was worth something, and they gave it back. Same with the jewelry. Not that I cared about the jewelry, it felt like a token gesture. Then, the $71,000. It was a chunk of what was taken, a small fraction of the total. The rest, gone, vanished, no trace. I tried not to focus on it, though it stung, every time I thought about how easily they had taken everything. But I wasn't stupid enough to think that money would fix anything. It didn't bring back what was lost, or the trust that had been shattered. I spent the next few weeks cleaning up the mess they left behind, starting with my digital life. I couldn't keep using the same accounts, the same passwords that felt tainted now. So I wiped everything. New bank, new email, new passwords. Everything more secure than it had ever been before. Two-factor authentication on everything. Encryption for extra measure. If there was one thing I could control, it was how I protected myself from the outside world. I didn't want to live in fear, but I didn't want to be caught off guard again either. And then there was the silence from my family. No calls, no texts, no apologies, just nothing. It hurt more than I expected. But I also knew, deep down, that this was where things stood. I had made my choice, and they had made theirs. We were different now, and maybe we always had been. Instead of wallowing in it, I found other ways to fill the empty space. I started hiking more. There was something about the quiet of the woods, the crunch of leaves underfoot, that made me feel like I could breathe again. Each trail felt like a small victory, a personal reclaiming of something I thought I'd lost. I also joined a local board game group. It seemed like a small thing at first, but I'd always liked games, strategy, problem solving, the way people's personalities came through in the way they played. The group was a mix of people, all sorts of ages and backgrounds, and it felt good to just sit around a table, rolling dice, laughing over bad moves, arguing over the rules. For once, I didn't feel like I was holding a secret, like I was carrying a weight that no one else knew about. It was just fun. That's where I met Tim. He was quieter than the others, more reserved, but there was something about him that drew me in. He didn't pry. He didn't ask about my past, about my life before this. It wasn't like he ignored me, but there was this calm way about him, like he didn't need to fill every silence with noise. He just let things be. We played our games, shared a few laughs, and over time, I found myself looking forward to seeing him each week. One night, we stayed after the game to talk, just the two of us. We sat at the table, sipping on drinks that had long gone warm, and somehow we ended up talking about life, the kind of conversation that usually makes me nervous, but with him, it was easy. "So, what's your deal?" he asked, his eyes glinting with curiosity, but not judgment. I paused, unsure of how much I wanted to say. The story felt too big, too heavy for this moment, but it felt right somehow. So I told him just enough. "I used to trust the wrong people," I said, and it was enough. He didn't press further. Instead, he just nodded, like he understood that some things were better left unspoken. It was that simple. Tim was quiet and respectful. He didn't need to know everything about me, and that was the best part. Being around someone who didn't want to fix me, who didn't need an explanation. I didn't feel lonely, not anymore. I felt at peace. The quiet wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It was mine, and I was beginning to understand it. I wasn't trying to fill it with people or things. I was just existing in it, finally able to take a breath without worrying that someone would take it from me. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't just surviving. I was living again. It's been 8 months now, and I don't think about them as much. Jill and Rob, I mean. Not in the way I used to, at least. The sting of betrayal isn't as sharp anymore, but it's there, lingering in the background, just enough to remind me of what they took and what they never gave back. I still don't talk to them. I don't want to. The calls from unknown numbers go straight to voicemail. I've learned to trust my instincts now. If it's something important, someone will leave a message. But I know better than to open the door to them again. I don't want them in my life. Not anymore. Not after everything they did. But the weird thing is, it's not about holding on to anger. It's more like closing a door I don't need to open, no matter how much my family might pressure me to. And I can hear them now, whispering behind my back, maybe telling themselves I'm the one who cut them off. But I don't care. I used to want their approval, their understanding, but now I'm good with myself. That's enough. Tim, though, he's different. Quiet, respectful, never prying, but still curious. He asked me once, just out of nowhere, as we were walking through the park, "What's your story? What happened to you?" It wasn't the first time someone had asked, but it felt different with him. He wasn't looking for the whole truth. He wasn't trying to fix anything. He was just asking because he cared, but not in a way that felt heavy. I thought about it for a second. How much could I tell him? How much did I even need to? I looked at him and said, I used to trust the wrong people. That was all. And it was enough. For both of us. He didn't ask for more, and I didn't feel the need to give it. The past wasn't something I had to drag around anymore. Not for him, not for anyone. And maybe that's the most important thing I've gained through all of this, the ability to trust myself again, to know that I've got my own back. I'm careful now, cautious but not paranoid. I don't need anyone to tell me I'm safe. I know what I've built, and it's strong enough to stand on its own. My savings are growing again, slowly. The balance isn't where it was before, but that doesn't matter. Each dollar means more now. It's not just about the money. It's about the control, the preparation. It's mine again. All of it. My accounts, my privacy, my future. The betrayal shaped me. Yeah, it was a harsh lesson, but it didn't define me. I own everything again. The life I've built, the choices I make, and the person I am now, no one can take that away from me, not even them. I close the door, and for the first time in a long time, I don't look back.